So like today's trends evolving onto that a little bit. Also, because when you're predicting things far in the future with security, it's kind of hard to do. For example, I'm pretty sure Marty McFly would be pretty horrified if he knew that we consider these things to be hoverboards these days. That is not what he was hoping for in the 1980s. So we've got 5 trends here. First one is on ransomware attacks. So we expect to see widespread ransomware drop even more than it is today. So the ransomware that hits people and wants like $300 from one human, that doesn't really work so well anymore because today's security software that people have in their home PCs does actually a very good job of stopping ransomware attacks and even having backup and things like that in place. So what we're going to see on the flip side is we're going to see what we call post-intrusion ransomware is happening much, much more. So this is where a skilled attacker gains access to a highly important network and they deploy a ransomware after they've fully understood how the network works and they've compromised and turned off all the security. They then install ransomware on the victim, and by the time they have actually engaged that ransomware, they know how much you're able to pay and they know you have no chance of actually stopping the ransomware from running the network because they've been on their network for about 2 months by that point. And this works particularly well against critical services like hospitals, schools, things like that that don't have a lot of money for a security budget, but can get money if they have to, because they're government bodies and things like that. So they can pay if they really have to. And we're seeing this all across the US at the moment. So the US is getting hammered by this kind of thing. There's a whole bunch of different families in this at the moment. So Ryuk is one, Sobaniki is another one. We expect the kind of organized crime groups behind this to start creating their own ones as opposed to buying off the shelf ones. A second trend is extortion will evolve even further. So the reason I put this one up is traditionally cybercrime is theft-based attacks, but we're moving to more extortion-based models instead. So we've seen a lot of disinformation campaigns, or fake news, if you like, being deployed today in both politics and all sorts of different walks of life. And this is a case of a video manipulation of a US politician called Nancy Pelosi. And what they did was they simply slowed down the video of her speech so that it appeared kind of slurred or like she was drunk or senile or something like that. And that was shared 2.5 million times on Facebook. Now, of the 2.5 million people, of course, a lot of people realized that was a fake video, but a lot of them didn't, because you could see the common thread and people calling for her to step down and that she was no longer fit for office and all of those type of things. And the reason I highlighted that is it's related to a trend that we see emerging, which personally worries me a lot, which is something called deepfake technology. So what deepfake technology is essentially using AI algorithms to do image or video manipulation, or audio also. And I won't go into deep level details on it, pun intended, but essentially you take a video that you want to superimpose somebody's face onto, or audio and you want to impose their voice pattern onto what was said. And that is, when you think about how that works, in the near future, you could get a call from your CEO, right? That is a video call that is very believable, looks just like them, sounds just like them, telling you to transfer money to some bank account that is, slightly unusual for you. And if you're familiar with business email compromise, that's essentially just the next level on from business email compromise. And that's not even that far off. That's really only a few months off the technology being that good to do this kind of thing. But of all the things with deepfakes, the one that kind of keeps me awake most at night is an idea we have, which would be something called deepfake ransomware. So simply put, this is combining today's extortion-based ransomware business models we see criminals doing with deepfake technology. So essentially you have an attacker who has an incriminating video of some description, and then they simply need to gather enough pictures and audio of their target to create the video to make it look like it comes from that person, right? Which, if they're a public figure, that's very easy to do. But even for anybody today, we all are guilty of oversharing things on the internet. We're also guilty of taking far too many selfies. So it's very simple to get a lot of pictures of somebody's face if you want to. And getting audio is really not that hard either. So the attacker creates the video. They then simply upload it to a private link of some description. So it's on the internet but hasn't been published yet. They set a counter to 24 or 48 hours. They set up like a Bitcoin wallet to receive the payment on, and then they extort the person and say, unless you pay us in the next 48 hours, we will send this video to all of your friends, right? So the risk of those type of attacks will actually work really well against two main groups of people. The first is politicians, and the second one is teenagers. So for politicians, they have the major problem, just like the Nancy Pelosi one, that nobody fact checks information anymore. So even though the video of 2 days later people realize it's fake, the damage is already done by that point to their career, especially if this was like a day or two before an election. And that makes them very, very good for extorting from a criminal point of view. And then for the teenager side, unfortunately, what will most likely happen there is attackers will take images of a very compromising nature, so something nudity or something sexually related. They will then look to superimpose the person's head onto that. And this is, if you're familiar with sextortion scams, which exist today, this is essentially really useful for the attackers because the biggest problem with a sextortion scam, if you are a criminal, is trying to get somebody to perform the sexual act on a webcam so you can then extort them. With this, you're getting extorted for something you didn't actually do, but it looks like you did. So it scales up much, much, much better from an attacker point of view. And the reason why that works, unfortunately, well, actually, there's certain demographics that just wouldn't work for. Right? For most of the people in this room, it doesn't scale that well. So take me, for example, if this happened to me and the video got published, my friends would mock me over it, right? They would, be like, oh my God, did you see the video of Bob? But they wouldn't really believe it's me in the video, right? So they'd take one look at it and they'd go, okay, well, I know Bob and he drinks a lot of Guinness. There's no way his chest looks that good, right? So the weird thing here is that making this work, the hardest thing might be reference videos from sites like slightlypastitdadbods.com or something like that. But on the teenage side, teenagers are, number one, becoming very aware of their bodies. They're also very driven by how their peers perceive them, more than any other kind of group in society. So even though they don't have as much money that as a politician would have to pay, they can and will try to pay, and they're less likely to reach out for help. And existing sextortion campaigns have led to teenage suicides. We've had at least 3 in Ireland. I know there's more in other countries that people have killed themselves rather than pay from the shame of what they've done. And remember, deepfake ransomware scales this up. So when this starts kicking in, and there's no reason why it won't, we will unfortunately see suicides as a result of this type of attack. So that's all kind of doom and gloom. So we'll move on to another one because teenage suicide is not the greatest topic for 10 o'clock in the morning. So third one of the 5 is criminals will go deeper into the financial systems. So what I mean by this is previously banking-oriented criminals focus very much on the consumer, so the end user, and use like classic in-browser attacks to get your login credentials for the bank and then clear you out of that money. And then they started targeting businesses because businesses have more money. And then a couple of years ago, the banks, you see, for ages were seen as invincible. But after some of the recent attacks on SWIFT networks and ATM networks, it's very clear that the idea that banks are invincible has disappeared from attackers' minds. So we're seeing more and more attacks like that. In fact, there was the Bangladesh bank attack, which was famous, involved the Philippines here as well, because some of the money was transferred into the Philippines bank accounts. So we expect these high-end organized crime groups to evolve and focus more on these kind of, not just the banks themselves, because they now understand how banks work, they're going to look at the interbank system itself, so how banks communicate to each other. So looking at central banks, clearinghouses, ATM networks, that kind of thing. And speaking of ATM networks, we actually did a paper on this a few years ago with Europol focusing on ATM malware. And what we found was at the time there was 2 main nexuses of where criminals who could do ATM malware came from. There was 1 or 2 groups located down in South America, and there was another nexus of about 3 groups in Russia. But at the time they were the only ones that had anything ATM related. Nowadays it's a commodity. Any of us can go onto a cybercriminal forward and buy an ATM malware kit for about 1,000 euros. So as a result of that, we will start seeing ATM malware attacks spread to other regions. So all around here in Southeast Asia, all around Europe and places that haven't been targeted before, because any criminal can buy this stuff these days. And then second last one, which is on the underground side of things. So criminal undergrounds, we expect to see that evolve a bit as well. As over the last few years, law enforcement have gotten a little bit better at shutting down some of these services, and criminals are responding as a result. So there was a particular website, which is not really a criminal hacking forum, but 8chan, which was shut down after one of the latest rounds of shooting in the United States. Actually, I don't even know if you count it as the latest one, because there's been a bunch since, unfortunately. But as soon as that was shut down, a mirror, an unofficial mirror, was set up called Zero 8chan on a network called ZeroNet. And ZeroNet is a little bit different from the internet in that everybody who's connected to ZeroNet is essentially hosting part of the content. So it's very hard to take down. There's not like a server where you can go and pull the plug on. You have to pull the plug on every single person that's in that network to get rid of the material. So it's different from Tor. Tor gives you privacy. ZeroNet does not at all. But we're seeing criminals looking at those kind of areas where how do we make our connections even more private using things like Tor overlays, and then how do we distribute our networks of command and control servers and hosting servers so they are much, much more difficult to take down. Now in the case of ZeroNet, they're probably not going to use that for a few reasons. One is that if you were part of a network like that, you are helping to host every piece of material that is on that network. So if somebody decided to set up a ZeroNet site for child abuse material, you will have a copy of some of that on your computer too, because you're hosting it for everybody. Which means you have in almost every country in the world, you have immediately broken the law the second you do that. So that's not great, but we're seeing also a lot more collaboration between criminals in different countries than ever before. So you see Russians and German forums, Chinese speakers and English forums and so on as they collaborate and sell to each other. So it's a very vibrant market and much more collaboration than in the past. And then the last one, the one I'll finish on, then we'll have time for questions. And this one's actually a bit of a non-prediction. So, which might be, not everybody will agree with me in this one, including people in my own team. I don't think that artificial intelligence will be heavily used and abused by criminals in the next 12 months. I think on the defensive side, so in cybersecurity, absolutely, artificial intelligence is critical to how we defend against attacks today. But from an attacker point of view, there isn't really a driving reason to move to using AI for three main reasons. The first one is if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it, right? So people often think that criminals have to constantly evolve to keep ahead of things. But if you think about it, every year, more and more people come online. So if you think of that like a big pie and you're getting market share off it, then as a criminal, you don't really need to compete against the other criminals. You're just trying to get to some of those new users before anybody else does. The second reason is that AI and machine learning requires lots of data. Now, if you ran a botnet, you can, of course, hoover up all that data if you really wanted to from all the connected machines. But to do that, you are going to put yourself more at risk that people will realize you've infected the machine because you've just exfiltrated a ton of data off it. And the third one, and this is kind of one people don't really think about, is that AI and machine learning requires specialist skills, right? Now, of course, there's a lot of online courses you can do today to learn it. But think for a minute, if you were doing a computer science degree, at what stage do you normally learn AI or machine learning? It's like the last year or second last year of college, or maybe in like master's level course, right? If you're a cyber criminal, you don't get that far in college. In most cases, most cyber criminals start in their teenage years, right? And if you're suddenly making 50,000 a month or 100,000 a month, you don't bother going to college, right? You don't get to that stage of your life. So just pure human nature, you don't get to the stage where you learn the stuff naturally. You have to actually, you have to decide to upskill yourself. And if your life involves stealing money and living on a beach somewhere, then you're not exactly having incentive to do this. So with that, hopefully I've given a bit of insight into some of the main cybercrime trends that we see today and some of the ones that we're expecting to see in the future. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you can throw at me on cybercrime, cybersecurity. If you have any